like I said, I sat in criminal law class and I knew I was going to be a trial lawyer, and that was it from the first day of law school. And like you said, my father, I did some work like you were talking about in Canada with lawyers really getting some internships or working in firms and getting that
Yeah,
practical experience. Yeah, I spent my third year of law school doing what we call in the US, it's a clinic. So I did a
yeah.
criminal law clinic where you get to be a student lawyer. And I spent so much time in court that I almost wasn't allowed to take some of my final exams because I wasn't in class enough, because I was in court all the time because I thought this is the greatest thing in the world. And
you, it
it,
came
I
natural to
learned.
you. Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And everybody around the world says, okay, we know where Canada is. In British Columbia, yeah, that's on the west coast, we know that too. And Vancouver is a major city, although the capital is Victoria. We are 500 miles, Prince George, 500 miles north of Vancouver, in the middle, exactly virtually in the middle of British Columbia, north, south, east, west. An absolute fabulous area, lots of timber, lots of trees, lots of animals. Within 50 miles of Prince George, we have probably 100 lakes. And it is nature's paradise. And so I love it. I've been here for about 60 years. Today, a very, very important, interesting podcast with a guest name is Laurie Gilbertson. Laurie Gilbertson, and Laurie is a former New York City sex crimes and organized crime prosecutor, television legal analyst, an educator, and an entrepreneur extraordinaire. Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I like hearing your description of where you are and then being able to see it in the window behind you. It's gorgeous.
It is fabulous. And you are in Denver, Colorado.
I am the land of 300 days of sun per year, which nobody really knows about.
So what is the temperature now? It's not quite,
Yeah,
is it?
it's in the 70s right now, but we got up to 96 yesterday. It's a
Yeah.
little bit of a heat wave. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite like Texas though, where it is
Mm-mm.
in the 90s all the time. It's in California. It's a heat wave here a bit too in our
Mhm.
area, and forest fires is something that is very, very delicate.
Yeah.
So, Laurie, tell us a bit about you, and obviously your background already lays out you're a trained lawyer, obviously, and
Mhm.
had an education and have been active in the prosecution side for quite a number of years, very high profile than the New York legal system, and I hear about it on CNN and all those high level cases
Yeah.
that reach the court. So tell us a bit about your background, personal background, where you were born, and then how did you go through your educational system and ended up to become a prosecutor and then an entrepreneur, educator, and obviously a very, very skilled communicator. And that, again, very, very critical in life. And I'm sure we will be talking about that a lot.
Well, I think like most people, maybe where I've ended up is not exactly where I thought I was going to be. So I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland. Bethesda's a suburb of Washington, D.C. And so I was it was a great place to grow up, really nice. I knew all about, growing up, all about politics. In high school, we would have pop quizzes about all the cabinet secretaries. We really were enmeshed in all this. And I grew up in a family where I am the oldest of four children. And my father is a patent attorney and, in fact, a patent litigator. So when we would sit around the table at night, at the dinner table, there were always these very lively discussions. And I really grew up without knowing it in this atmosphere of advocacy and great communication. And I have to say, growing up, that most of us would disagree, my mom included, with my dad on most things. And we would have this incredibly lively conversation of, the five of us attacking him and him being in his element as a trial lawyer, just wanting to give it right back.
He loves it because it was just like being at
Yes.
work, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I grew up with that, and probably at the age of, 5, 6 when I was young, that came out as wanting to be an actor. I would put on shows in the neighborhood. I would draft all the neighborhood children, and that was my communication outlet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah.
difference for your dad and the future of you was at the end of the arguments around the kitchen table and around dinner, you still knew you loved each other very deeply.
Yeah.
That didn't always
Yes.
happen in the courts, obviously. You know?
That's very true. Often in the courts, you don't even start out liking each other.
No.
But sometimes you do. Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
But you don't always end up that way, for sure. So all of this was being ingrained in me almost subconsciously. It's not something I really understood, but it's something I grew up with. And I really learned to advocate for myself, to advocate for what I believed in, for advocate for what I was passionate about, and to bring evidence to support it. You can't just say things to my dad without having the evidence to support it. And so that was a really great life lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I eventually went on, I went to college in upstate New York. I went to Cornell, which I absolutely loved, and I got this opportunity to really explore lots of different things. So taking great courses on government, English, history, and I started getting into journalism as well.
Now, Cornell University has a fabulous reputation, right?
Mhm. It does. It is very isolated. It's up in Ithaca, New York, where it's freezing cold, probably 9 months of the year. We used to say you have, 2 seasons, winter and summer. That's about it.
Yeah.
And you really get a chance to learn from, world-class professors, to be with lots of really incredibly motivated and intelligent students from all over the world. And it was coming from a very small school in Bethesda, Maryland. I went to a small private school, graduated with 70 people in my class, to go to Cornell with 15,000 people from all over the world was truly eye-opening, and I really got to explore a lot of those things that I think the seed had been planted for at that kitchen table when I was really young.
Right. And
Yeah.
and so then, so then when you finished, you
Mhm.
got your law degree, and then did you start working for a firm, or and initially most people that leave the legal schooling, at least in Canada, I presume
Mhm.
the US is the same, first have to do an interim period before they get their official law degree in a firm of some sort, or being interactive in some form or fashion.
Yeah, it works differently in the US.
Okay,
So you graduate either 3 years of law school,
right.
when you go during the day. If you go at night, usually people who are working full time, will go at night, and that's 4 years. And the US right now, and I happen to think, your way, can be so much better. The US doesn't really require that. So you graduate from law school, you take the bar exam. If you pass the bar exam and you go through all the character fitness tests, all of that, interviews, that kind of thing, you become licensed to practice. You do not have to have any kind of practical experience, which is crazy, right? So
Yeah.
that generally comes on the job afterwards. So with
Yes.
me, I really had kind of gotten into journalism a bit in college. I started doing the news on the radio station. I did some TV work. I wrote for the Cornell Daily Sun, which is the newspaper there. And I really was thinking, am I going to go do something in journalism or go to law school?
Right.
And I can't even tell you right now why I made the decision to go to law school. I was 21 years old. I just kind of said, oh, I'm going to go to law school. So I went, and my very first day sitting in criminal law class, I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer, but I didn't know much more than that. I was listening to the professor, and he's telling these stories of, things that have happened and various crimes, and then how that affected the law. And I was enraptured. And I thought, this is something I could do. Like I could actually get paid to go do this kind of law that's so exciting with all of these incredible stories that really are personal and affect people. It felt so real and
So
so relevant. And that was it.
So the challenge then was when you left Cornell and you got
Mhm.
accepted by the bar, you now were a formal lawyer and you could practice. Then the decision,
Mhm.
just for the benefit of our guest,
Yes.
then I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but you
Mhm.
know, the for our guest, then you had to make the decision: would you go civil or would you go criminal law, and
Right.
the two are distinctly different. Correct me if I'm
Correct.
wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. They are very different. And civil law can involve, all sorts of disputes between corporations. It can involve transactional work where you're not, you're doing contracts or real estate, things like that. Yeah.
I.e., patent law tends to
Yes.
be civil. So
Correct.
it brings me back to your kitchen table where you're sitting there and talking about adversary
Yeah.
situations
Mhm.
and civil law. And so that brought you, I'm just guessing, somewhere
Mhm.
when you were 21 and you had to make a decision: should I go journalism or should I go law?
Mhm.
It must indirect or directly brought you back to your dad and the discussions and saying, I like that, you know, because
Oh,
it
yeah.
is the challenge of law and all the more pleasant sides of it. And I'm sure it gets ugly once in a while as well. But becoming a good communicator becomes critical in law, arguing cases that criminally, I presume, as well as civil, that again, it's very structured as to how you can present the case either to a jury or to to a judge. It becomes critical how you do it, very strategic. It needs, every case is different and it needs a different approach.
Yes. Yes. And the communication part of it, and what I believe is really that storytelling part of it, really condensing everything into a really understandable way for a jury of people who are not used to court, where it can be very intimidating, or for a judge who may really know nothing about the case at all, or even maybe about the law that you're going to be talking about. So it's all about doing the work for your audience, depending on which audience it is. And for me, that it was never a decision between civil and criminal. Like I said, I sat in criminal law class and I knew I was going to be a trial lawyer, and that was it from the first day of law school. And like you said, my father, I did some work like you were talking about in Canada with lawyers really getting some internships or working in firms and getting that
Yeah,
practical experience. Yeah, I spent my third year of law school doing what we call in the US, it's a clinic. So I did a
yeah.
criminal law clinic where you get to be a student lawyer. And I spent so much time in court that I almost wasn't allowed to take some of my final exams because I wasn't in class enough, because I was in court all the time because I thought this is the greatest thing in the world. And
you, it
it,
came
I
natural to
learned
you.
it. It must have been all the kitchen table stuff and all those shows
Yeah,
I forced the neighborhood
I'm
children to
sure.
be a part of.
Yeah,
But I did that, and that's where I really figured out that I wanted to be on the prosecution side. I spent 6 months, half a year of law school, my third year, trying cases and doing dockets, all the cases that go into court as a prosecutor. And then I spent half a year being a defense attorney, both
yeah.
incredibly important jobs. And I found I was much more suited to the prosecution side. I really felt that as a prosecutor, with the power you have, with the resources that you often have, there was such an opportunity to do justice. And that's what I
Now,
wanted to do.
correct me if I am wrong,
Mhm.
Laurie. Prosecutors are only in criminal cases, not necessarily in civil cases. Am I correct there?
Uh, yes, correct. The prosecutors are in criminal cases. When civil cases are brought by the government, you have either a a civil attorney, an assistant attorney general, or you have an assistant United States attorney on the federal side who bring those cases. So the government can also bring civil cases as they often do, but that's not the same terminology as being a prosecutor. Correct.
Correct. And so the other part that and interesting enough, personally, I've not been. The only time I was involved in a civil case when it was about, I'm a lumber manufacturer, and something had happened with the quality of lumber that we bought, and that was, there were in effect two sets of grading rules. One was the one that builders, architects, engineers relied on, and then there was another set of grading rules, far less restrictive, that were confidential and companies manufactured to that standard and made in the process hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for about 20 years. And I started naively. I had never been in a court, ever, not even sitting in the bleachers.
And nobody wants to be in court. You're never generally there at a happy time. It's always the worst time.
So I filed a civil lawsuit against a number of parties, and I thought it was local or regional. Then the more I found out about it, it then became, it was not only provincial or Canada, it was North America that had two sets of grading rules of lumber, one official one, and then the much less restrictive that had been in effect for nearly 20 years and made billions of dollars. And I started it here, and once it was in motion, it could not be stopped. And the process, I was in front of a judge for 69 days, and I spent, never been in a court, I was in cross-examination for more than a week. And for our guests to know that, what that is like, is that for somebody that has never been, I only could afford, they cut off all my flow of supply, they were trying to put me out of business, all those kind of stuff happened in the background, but in front of the judge to make the argument, I'd never been in a court. And I only could afford one lawyer, and by exception, I was allowed to sit next to the lawyer because I was organizing all the documents, and and so the case went on for 69 days. It involved lawyers that were the parties that were called in the civil case were about 4, and then there were probably another 12 that were indirectly involved. I don't know how you call that again, that may be affected by the outcome of this case. So there were about 14 or 16 lawyers involved, indirectly on the other side. And having never been involved in cross-examination, it's very intimidating because, the way the process works, I had discoveries about 12 days. So next to me when I was in cross, at about 12 stacks of discovery documents that were given under oath and were described. So very intimidating process. But at the end of the case, I won the case. And even with some of the best lawyers in Canada were cross-examining me. And even then, I say the judicial system has really nothing to do with justice. It has everything to do with law, legal law, not necessarily justice. And then being able to withstand cross-examination for somebody that is not familiar with it can become extremely intimidating and very deliberate in terms of creating credibility problems with the person that is being cross-examined or winning the case for the other side. So that was quite an experience, but I came out.
I
I'm
bet.
thinking about at some point to write a book about that. I'm an author
Yeah.
as well. I've done about 4 books. I'm working on my fifth and sixth. But at some point, I want to do one over that experience personally. But in one of the
Hmm.
case, it changed the grading rules of lumber in North America from Florida to California, Labrador to Alaska.
Wow. How many days were you on the stand? How many days did you say?
5 days cross
Five
examination.
days. Wow.
That's a
You
long
said you,
time by two of the most
yeah.
able and the best that money can buy,
Mhm.
cross-examining me. And as you
I,
know, and for our guest, is that you cannot talk to your lawyer. You're all on your own, even not after
Mhm.
or and you are under cross-examination means you're on your own.
Yeah, it's important to be for every witness who's going to be on the stand, no matter what, to be prepared, right? And that's the lawyer's job to prepare you, not, for your direct exam when you're telling your part with your lawyer, and then for cross. And that is huge.
And again, for
Yeah.
our guest, what you were saying is important. It starts with then, and not the whole structure, but then direct is where you being then examined for all in terms of things that you prepared for together with your legal counsel to get your views and your experience on the record, and then, but then takes over the other side's lawyers. That means you're in cross
Right.
examination.
It makes me think of a few things. First being that being on the witness stand as a civilian witness, meaning you're not an expert witness who testifies all the time. You're not a witness such as that I would put on the stand. Doctors who had to come testify about injuries, or the medical examiner who would come testify about cause of death, or say a ballistics expert who would testify about the gun used in a crime or a shooting. Those are what we often used to call wind up witnesses. They know what to do. You put them on the stand, they go and they
Yeah,
talk to the jury, and they're
no
personable. They know
surprises.
what they're doing, right? You don't want any. Sometimes there are, but right, no real surprises. And then you talk about civilian witnesses, such as you were in your case, and obviously this was, even though it was a civil case, something very emotional, very close to your heart, very important to your business and to your personal life. It was everything for you, so there's emotion involved there too. Then you put a witness such as yourself in a very scary, very somewhat intimidating place, right? A courtroom with someone who is trained to kind of destroy their story, and that can be absolutely terrifying.
And then the thing that also was part of it, that's why this will, I always say it will become a movie at some point, I'm sure.
Mhm.
This happened about 20, 30 years ago, so the emotional
Mhm.
part of it is gone. For me, I can look at it more realistically now. But it involved 5 arsons that happened in 3 months. My business had been destroyed, and
Oh,
all the bad things are happening. I'm not saying that the persons that were being the action was against were the ones that did that, but indirectly, all kinds of things happen around it. So,
yeah.
so when I was on the stand, I had nothing left, So and
Oh, goodness.
so, but I won the case. And the way I won the case is I tell the truth and I will not be intimidated. And
Mhm.
so I very quickly learned the process. But I must say that the lawyers that cross-examined me, I have a great deal of respect for them. They were craftspeople doing the job that they were hired to do. The signal that I give to the people in general is, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the legal system, at least in Canada, I presume the United States is the same, has nothing to do with justice. It's not about that. It is about the legal system that will be followed, and it's not perfect, but it's the best we have because there is no alternative. But for somebody to believe that what they did is not just, or that's why you go to court, and then you will be found to be, the justice side is on your side. That's nothing to do with that. It follows the process. You have to know the process. The better you know the process, the better your chances are of being successful in legal actions. But the more
I
money that
agree.
is involved, and in this one, multi-billion dollars, the more is at stake and the more challenging it will become.
I agree with all of that, except for the kind of blanket statement that it's not about justice. I mean, ultimately, at least in the US and the criminal justice system, which has so many issues, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
should qualify it by
justice is the
saying
goal.
respectfully, obviously I'm not the
Yeah.
authority, but I'm talking about civil law now, not so much
Mhm. Yeah.
criminal law. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think you had a front row seat to that for
Yeah.
sure, and ultimately, right, you want any justice system, any legal system to be about justice. And like you said, it's just the way that we get there. How you have to get there through, like you had this very winding road of the law, which is I mean, it's incomprehensible to lawyers sometimes. So of course it's going to be confusing and emotional also when you're involved in it.
So what it did for me, probably, Laurie, is that at the time, I was probably 1987. I was about 47 years
Mhm.
old. I'm 83, nearly 84 now. So it's quite a while ago. It reminds me, in a way, as I'm talking to you, about you sitting around the kitchen table, and that all those arguments that were made there in a good sense laid the foundation for you as would you go from there, with the neighborhood putting on make-believe cases where you could make arguments, and it laid the foundation of who you likely are today and going forward, which first and foremost likely means a very effective, thoughtful, articulate person as far as communications is involved. And even more importantly, and to me as well, is that being effective communicators, understanding arguments, and being articulate about that is critical, not only in terms of law, but also in terms of life in general, entrepreneurship, but also in daily life as things happen. And it makes me unique in that way. That laid the foundation in a way. It was followed by it becoming more and more important to me in terms of becoming an effective communicator.
Mhm.
I was not very good at that at first. I ended up at, and I have to just share this with you, even after a case like that, I was still not very effective in being a good communicator. And then, by coincidence, somebody suggested that I would go to Toastmasters. And I said, "What is Toastmasters all about?" And he said, "Well, you just sit there." He said, "Nobody's going to ask me anything, right? I don't mind going there, but I don't want..." No, 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 no. You just sit down and then you just listen. It's all about communications and becoming a good communicator. So I said, "Okay, I'll go." And so I was sitting there halfway through the meeting. Somebody said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." And I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." But I did. I stayed there for 10
Good for you.
years, between
Wow.
1990 and 2000. After the court case, and I won to the highest level in Toastmasters, which is a distinguished Toastmaster.
Yeah.
For people watching us, I'm a big advocate of communication, but also Toastmasters as a vehicle. Probably as we speak, probably there's 450,000 people in North America that are members of Toastmaster clubs. And our community here has probably 2 or 3 clubs, and you know, and that, and at the same time, they may not always go to that level or don't need to go to that level. For me, it was important is that, and probably 10 million people around the world at some point were part of Toastmasters, and then the other part that I was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're so interesting in all these topics to me, I get all excited about it. But you know, so that becoming a good communicator to me, and I'm going to write a book about it. I'm in the process of writing the book about it. I still haven't found a title for it, but it's coming out next August.
My brain's going right now on what the title can be. We need to talk. Really,
Yeah,
I'm
we
actually
will.
jotting
I want
my
to keep
notes
you
down.
involved in it. You know, so I say the first and far most important part of becoming a good communicator is first and foremost become a good listener. And then at the same time being able, and Toastmaster taught me that. The other part is not too much speaking, but thinking on your feet. And Toastmasters taught me that. And then at the same time, thinking in your mind quickly about where do I go from here? How do I, without, and for me it's delicate and dangerous because the other part about me, although it took me a long time to find out about it, is that I'm ADHD. And it took me till 1997. And already I had been here in Canada for 32 years. I came here in 1965, but still had issues outside of the court thing that happened. I had to then, that I was not very, very effective in communicating and thinking on my feet, and didn't have the confidence. And so then I picked up a book in a store here in 1997, a book that was written by Dr. Helliwell, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction. And as I opened the book, I still don't know why I want that. I still don't know why. I still have the book. It was written in 1993 by Dr. Helliwell. I bought it. I wrote in the book in Dutch, actually. You know, and it was January 1997. And it was all about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. So, you know, and then the more I found out about ADHD, the more I started realizing that the frequency of occurrence is quite high, actually. It was thought to be probably 8 to 10%. The more I thought about it, the more it's higher than that. And then you are podcast number 282. I had an opportunity to bring back Dr. Helliwell, ADHD doctor.
Oh.
Has written 18 books, 5 on distraction, is dyslexic, so am I, and ADHD, and so podcast number 203, and you know, so, and while we were discussing it, I suggested to Dr. Helliwell that my finding is, and he's the expert obviously, that I believe that the frequency of occurrence is probably more than 20%. And he said, no, John, it's 25% or more. I agree with him. And then the other part that I found interesting is that I believe with successful entrepreneurs or CEOs that the frequency of occurrence is probably, in my opinion, I suggested to Dr. Helliwell, is probably 50%. He said, no, John, it's more than 75%. And I believe that as well. So then the more I thought about it, the more I thought it's important for me to talk about it, because I was academically not very successful in school. In Holland, I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? You know, so people suggested to my parents, that they were beautiful people, that, you should send them to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. But we'll teach them a trade. And I liked lumber, and so so they sent me at 13 to a furniture factory, and I loved it. And in the evening I would go become a furniture maker. And so that again, thinking about the foundation, what brought me here, this was in Northern Holland. What brought me here is that I wanted to build a lumber mill, and if it were not for the fact that I had hands-on experience, learned about lumber already, my dad worked in lumber, my grandfather was a master carpenter, my dream was to build my own lumber mill, and I did that, several of them actually in other businesses. So, but ADHD to me then became something in 1997 when I was already 57 years old. It took me 5 years before I talked to my doc about it.
Oh, wow.
It was a personal friend that lived with our two daughters, and one day I went into his office. He said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so by then I was 62 years old. And so looking back, the more I found out about ADHD, the more I felt I had an obligation to talk about it. For me, it took 50 years from the time I was 13 to the time I was 62, to find out about ADHD. So I wrote a book about that, ADHD Unlocked, and very popular actually. I'm going to send you a copy of this. I'll sign it for you and some of the other ones.
I would love that. And that must have been, part of communication before you can really communicate well is knowing yourself, right? You have to know your audience. There's all sorts of things, but you have to know yourself. So I would imagine, for you, that discovery and seeing yourself and being drawn to this book must have been scary in a way, but also so freeing because you could finally know yourself. And that must have unleashed a lot of relief and also made you such a better communicator because you could finally really tap into everything that makes you you.
Everything changed, Laurie, from that point forward. And so for me, what was important is, I was born during the Second World War in northeastern Holland, saw far too much that we should not have seen. Things were extremely tough and difficult, still have affected by PTSD in the child, all those kind of things. And then being liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, at 5 years old, I knew I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I tried to go when I was 17, but then was drafted into the Dutch Air Force. But then finally I went when I was 23 years old and went to Canada. And so the one dream I had is to go to Canada. The other one is build my own lumber mill. And then the other part was start with nothing. And I had one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. And I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia, that's where all the timber is, but I couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. And so when I came to Vancouver, by coincidence, went through the immigration department, there was a German fellow there, and I could speak a little bit of German, and told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George, that's where the booms are, that's where the opportunities are. So that's where I went on the bus, 12 hours to Prince George. Came off the bus, I can still see it close by, about 3 blocks, 60 years ago. Came off the bus, I had my suitcase, my 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. So, but I had the dream of building a mill, but what I had lots of is attitude. No matter how tough things, I always been that way. No matter how tough things, I always say tomorrow is a better day. I don't allow around me negative. I had my passion. I give it, whatever I do, I give it 125%. And then the other part, work ethic, I work harder than anybody, even now at nearly 84. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I'm always in a hurry. And so, and I still
I
work
always
12.
make my bed too. I do, but I don't get up at 5:30 in the morning though. But I do always make my bed every day.
Yeah. So, and I like that, So, but then, the other part, a little bit about me is I'm going to send you copies of my book because I want to state the last one that I did just came out 2 days ago, and it's this one, Living Young, Dying
Wow,
Old.
look at that picture. That's
That's
awesome.
me. I'm the
Yeah, I
oldest.
know. That's
I'm the
great.
oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. So,
What do you like about it, about the bodybuilding that keeps you doing that?
how it happened, Laurie, is by coincidence.
Mhm.
Again, after I had in 2008, I was already 68 years old. I got a case of diverticulitis, and that up to that point, my wife is a vegetarian, and I didn't listen all that well. I was okay, but not as good as I could be, so. And then I got the case of diverticulitis, and it broke, breached, and it became very, very delicate because the toxins affect all your organs. So you have about 48 hours or so, and I
Wow.
came that close, So, and then I knew I had to pay more attention on my physical health, and go back to a good food and to the exercise. And so I, after I recovered in 2009, I started to hire a trainer and then went to the gym. And I did that for I was out of shape, and I did it about up to that point, I was just like everybody else. At the end of the year, we say, we're going to do this, that, and I'm going to buy a gym
Right.
membership. And then after 2 weeks, you can find 100 reasons why we're too busy, we can't go there.
Oh yeah.
But then I had to be serious about it. And after being in the gym and doing all the other things for about 6 years, somebody came up to us and said, hey, John, have you ever thought about competing? And I said, me? He said, yeah. And I said, well, why not? It's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I started competing, and then, in competing in Northern BC, came in second bodybuilding, third in physique, qualified me for the provincials, came in third physique, second bodybuilding, qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then
Oh wow.
COVID came, and now
Oh,
again I'm training for 2025, and I'm 85, and again go to the Arnolds, and then and the same with diet. I started to looking at life, all the things that are important, and I started then to think I should write a book about that. That's the result of this book, Living
yeah.
Young, Dying Old.
So
And
you must
and
enjoy writing too.
the amazing part, Laurie, is that, and that's part of ADHD. I'm very good at numbers, and I'm very good writer, and not necessarily a reader because I'm dyslexic as well,
Mhm.
But with my ADHD, and but I'm a very, very good writer, and so. And again, is that coming back to ADHD? I call it a superpower. A lot of people say
Yeah,
to me,
I was thinking
how
that.
you do all this stuff? You have 10 different companies, and then you write these books, and then you're podcasting, and you do
Yeah.
this, that, and the other thing. How do you? I say ADHD. That's how I do it.
Well, we learned as trial lawyers that, you can't control the facts of your case, right? Something happens, someone shoots someone, something awful happens, then it comes to me, right? The worst time in people's lives, it comes to me, but you can't control the facts. But what you and so there may be weaknesses in your case, but you can control how you frame it and how you communicate it. So you can take these weaknesses and you turn them into strengths. And that's how you do it. And so when I'm thinking of you with the ADHD, what some people might consider that's a weakness or that's something that's held you back, in fact, you've turned it into your superpower, right? Huge
Yeah.
strength. Yeah.
And that already served me well. I didn't know it then, but that served me very well in the civil case that I did. as a witness being cross-examined, because I'm very, very good at details when it is something that is of extreme interest to me. So I had one lawyer that I
Too.
worked with, and then I did, and then go back to late 80s. Computers and all the other things were not used, so it was all documents. So I had one room with about 40 banker boxes, but I virtually knew every document, and
Yeah.
I have an extremely good memory. Even today, I do. That's why I get so teed up, and I hear about when you're 80, you're too old, and you should go. Without getting into
Yeah.
politics about the U.S., but they have one candidate is 81, and the other is 79, and the one is supposed to be too old, and the other one. What's the other one then? So, so
Yeah.
anyway. But I say my book is saying that at 84, saying that challenge me, that I say to the public in general, age is just a number. It is, the quality of life that is important, and then age will move up the more you take care of your body. That is such an amazing organ, really, that if you treat it, it wants to be healthy and fit. As long as you treat it well, don't abuse it. It does only take so much abuse. And then fitness is that don't have to be an Olympian or a
Or a
bodybuilder of some.
bodybuilder.
No, no.
Or a
I say
bodybuilder at 83. You don't have to.
no. But just be. So the whole. I say it
Active.
can be done, and so at least maintain your diet, sleep, exercise, and stay active mentally, and then be at peace with who you are. It took me a long time to get there, but be at peace.
Well, it's all so connected, right? There's just that mind-body connection that, right, the healthier you are in your body, the more that helps I mean, the brain wants activity. The brain
Exactly.
wants your body to be active. The brain needs you to not be staring at a screen all day long. The brain needs you to be outside and get sunlight and get exercise, no matter what it is. I
Exactly.
am not a bodybuilder like you, but I do walk my dog a couple times a day at least. I get out there, or I go running, and the way you feel, right? The chemicals that are released in our brains, the way you feel after, just it's such a great cycle of being active and being healthy, and that helping your brain, and then that, helping you be motivated to do more. It,
And
it
that's the
really is
point that I'm making,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other part about that, Laurie, is also, what has happened is that people are not getting the same. When I grew up, it was very common for people to sit in a restaurant or a coffee shop and interact with people socially. Now, a lot of times, because of iPhones and all the other things of communication, we are less together than it used to be. And and for me, what has been important is that first initially, well before COVID, was blogging and staying in touch with people in a general way. Then started a form of podcasting more on a regional basis, and then COVID came, and then saying, what are we going to do now? And so I had this apartment, and saying, well, let's make this a studio, and we'll start podcasting from here again regionally, and then saying, maybe I need an office. I had an apartment in Vancouver. Maybe I need an office or a studio there as well. And then the more I thought about it, the more I look at TV, see channel CNN, ABC, and all the other guys, 1, 2, 3, 4 different people on television. Virtual is becoming finally to the point where it works. And Sarah said, well, let's do it virtually, because it feels to me like you and me, you may as well be sitting here, because that's how it feels. We are so close and interacting like this. And it is still very much at the beginning in my mind, is that we're podcasting around the globe, from one day in Africa or Australia to the next day in Greece or Athens or Sweden or wherever, and it has become not only you and me interacting, but we already know probably 10,000 people or more are watching us in our podcast here. It has become a whole new way of communicating.
It has been, and it's so much about that connection and so much about communication like we're doing right now is just about that connection. And you could be sitting together and not have it, or you could be like we are thousands of miles away and have it. And like you are, bringing all of this to thousands of people in your audience. And I used to coach, I do coach, and a lot of my one-on-one coaching was in person. And then during COVID, of course, that all changed. And then I realized I could coach people all over the world because of this now. And now I do, and it is incredible. And you really can form that connection.
And it forms a whole, and I'm kind of looking at that myself, because communication has become so critically important for me right from the time that I was a kid growing up in a war zone, through not being successful academically, to going through that and having to change direction to find me, to give me confidence that I was not better than, but just as good as the other friends of mine that went to college and universities, and then started kind of looking down on me somewhat because I became a laborer. Today I'm proud of that, but then it was something I was challenged with. And then saying, I'm going to go to the other side of the world, to the lands of my heroes, start with nothing to prove to myself I'm going to build a lumber mill. And as far as I was concerned, there was no question about it that that's exactly what would happen. But then in the meantime, the lawsuit, although it was emotionally very challenging, but it taught me a lot of things that became very valuable in going forward, hence Toastmasters, and becoming a good communicator, doing a lot of keynote presentations. But even keynotes to me now are more challenging, because I believe that podcasting is more effective, reaching more people. A lot of times it's me sitting in northern British Columbia. If I do keynotes in the United States, it takes me at least 2 days between going there, preparing, and all the other kind of stuff. And so podcasting has become the new media, much more effective and around the world. So now I'm kind of looking at not only being very active as a podcaster globally, but setting up a new platform in a number of different areas, because all of that is just happening as we speak.
Yeah, I love podcasting. I guest a lot. I've thought of starting one. Maybe you and I will have to talk. I'd love some advice from you. I'm not anywhere near there right now. But when I was first working in New York, I was living in a little studio apartment, and I was working as a prosecutor. So very long days, very long nights. We were called out at all times. And sometimes it would be hard to get to sleep after, going to a crime scene in the middle of the night and then having to come back. And I would listen to talk radio, back when it was just the radio, and I would listen to it, and I loved it because I could learn, and I felt like I was in the room with these people, and it didn't matter what this topic was. People would call in, I loved it. And so I feel like podcasting is this extension of it. Like I love all of it, that I can learn about things. I can connect with people like you. I love listening. I love being on them. I think I think some people kind of, it's becoming somewhat of the butt of jokes sometimes because there's so many podcasts. It's just so pervasive. But I think it is, what an incredible tool for people to be able, like yourself, to be able to communicate. I mean, you alone have probably 100 books in you of things you could write about,
Yeah.
and yet you get these stories across in your podcasting. And I just think it is a fantastic new tool for people to make use of, both
Yeah,
listening and producing them.
yeah, and then the amazing part about it, Laurie, as you well know, is that all the things that I've gone through and all the challenges along the way. I wrote a book about it. I'm going to send you copies of all these books. Against All
I
Odds
love it.
was the first one that I did. Not about how successful John is, but all the ups and downs about it.
Mhm.
And, so now I believe that, as you do, is that probably the one most important part of being successful in life is becoming a good, effective communicator. And I believe in not teaching young people or of any age more of that. And I think there are opportunities there. So I started my book on that. It will come out next August. And I'd like to talk to you about
Mhm.
that and your views on it, and
Yeah.
stay in touch with you on all of those. And
Yeah, I'd
and
love that.
yeah, and then the podcasting, it's still on its infancy in my mind, and so powerful, and knowing that people that subscribing on it, we just passed 300,000 on YouTube subscribers today, I think, so it's unbelievable.
Uh,
And knowing that
yeah.
all the other medias we have, I'm not bragging about it, I'm still simply interacting with you on the power of podcasting, or interacting globally in all the possibilities there. Millions and millions and people are watching, and I know that this discussion between you and me, we will have tens of thousands of people watching. And the platform is becoming more and more and more powerful. I look at the local media, newspapers are secondary now. Even some of the newscasts that we watching, a lot of people don't watch it anymore because over and over and
Mhm.
over again, trying to sell you products that you don't need or want. And the podcasting is so genuine. And for me, as you have yourself, you never know what will happen. And and the nearly 300 podcasts where I've been hosting, or even the other ones, and you have had the same. I never know what will
Mhm.
happen, and I love
Yeah.
that, because that is
Yeah.
helped my world and yours as well. And you're
Yeah.
very good at it, and it keeps my brain active at 84 years old, nearly 84 years old, and it keeps me active doing all the things that I'm doing, and I love it.
Mhm. That kind of, just a conversation like this, which is then becomes a conversation with all of your listeners and your viewers. That's what's at the heart of good communication, and just being open and vulnerable and sharing, and it not being scripted, and just not necessarily knowing where the conversation will go. And those are some really good life lessons too, because you don't know where things are going to go in your life. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. Never in a million years did I think I'd end up doing that. But starting with those kinds of conversations and being open with people, and I like to call it's like this micro communication. It's like a practice all the time, and it does, like you've said, just communicate to life. All of it, it's so intertwined.
It reminds me in a way, Laurie, about what I was saying in the earlier part, or we both were saying, is that communications has changed. Where when I grew up, people would go to the restaurant or coffee shops and sit there interacting. Now what we see is more and more people using iPhones, and communications has changed. It's no longer that form of communications that we had then, but I believe these kinds are replacing it in a big way, even over newspapers and newscasts, because these conversations are genuine between people from around the world, talking about issues that affect everybody, being genuine and open. And the ones that are successful, like both you and me are on our podcasting, we get an immense amount of response. And that kind of tells me to keep doing what we are doing, knowing that it's not just you and me, it's tens of thousands of people watching us, and learning from experiences that we've had and applying it to their lives. And that's why it is so critically important in my mind.
Yeah, and that's and hopefully, we still get those great communications over, a glass of wine or a wonderful meal, and we get to be in person with the people who
Sh-
we, love and want to
Sure,
connect with, because that's so essential, right, to
exactly.
feeling good. But that we can supplement it, we can have this whole new way of communicating that adds to it and adds good
It,
things to it,
and
is
that's the point.
wonderful too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And
Lori,
the listening, like you
and
said,
the
right?
listening. Lori,
And the
I want to
listening.
stay in touch with you. You are an amazing guest on my podcast. I knew it when I read your bio. I was so excited about it because you have such an amazing experience. For all the people watching us, I would
Mhm.
suggest that, to be part of discussions like we have with Laurie and other people that both Laurie will have and I will have. Subscribe to our podcast. Share it with others, comment on it, like it, to encourage us and others to have more interactions between all the different people that we talk about around the globe. And podcasting will be with us, and we will stay the course. Encouragement is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're always going to learn, and
Yes.
learning keeps you young too.
There's no question. I will
Yeah,
send. I will get Scott to get your address, and I will send you copies of my
wonderful.
different books, and I will sign them
I
for
look
you.
forward to it.
And then let's stay in touch because I'm working on the book for the communications book, and I like to share some of the things that I'm doing. Probably even get some of quotes that you can offer to me to be part of my book.
I would love to continue the conversation, and I've got this right here that I've been jotting down names for your book. So we'll have to
I
talk.
I
Titles for your
love
book.
it. Yeah. And you got my contact number and all those things. So stay in touch.
Absolutely. This has been such a lovely, for me, it's morning. So lovely morning here in Denver, getting to have a conversation with you all the way a couple thousand miles away. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Laurie. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye bye. Okay. Hey, Laurie, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did it go
Yes.
well?
Yes. Yes. That was lovely. Yes.
Interesting, right? So
Mhm.
as soon as I looked at your bio, I knew right away this is going to be very, very exciting. And the part that is important to me, and same as you, is what laid the foundation is what happened around your dinner table, your dad's influence in law, and then you taking it forward from there. That then laid the foundation for the future and the things that you're doing or thinking about doing now. And the same with me. It's my grandfather being master carpenter and my dad being in lumber and then being liberated by the Canadians. It would lay the foundation already when I was 5 years old, and
Yeah.
even that part still, and the challenges along the way, including the lawsuit, that
Mhm.
that at some point I want to write a book about it. The emotional
Yeah.
part now, I can look at it more as part of life, and that a lot of people don't fully understand. How does that system work really in
Mhm.
principle? What are the dynamics of a civil action in this particular
Yeah.
case? So
It was intense. I mean, to be on the witness stand for that long, I used to have to, I mean, I was in court every day trying cases, but occasionally I would take statements, I would do lineups, things like that, that I'd have to testify in other people's cases. And it was such an intimidating, scary thing for me to be on the witness stand. And I was, a professional in court all the time. So I can only imagine, how intense that must have been. And I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen Steve Jobs from Apple, Steve Jobs's commencement speech at Stanford? Have
I
you heard that?
I did. I am a
Yeah.
great admirer of him. He died
Mhm.
much too young,
Yeah.
but his past is still very much part of our future
Yeah.
and present,
Well,
right?
yeah, his speech was, just about all these different things that happened in his life and how they ultimately, right, led him to where he was. And I was thinking of that as you were telling a lot of your story. And so interesting how you've kind of presented mine that way too, how just all these things that you don't even really think about at the time, they lead you in your life, which
Exactly.
and you just have to
But
be open to it.
the biggest part about it is to be, it took me a long time to find that self-confidence and being at peace with who you are and what you are. And I said it a lot of times to younger people in presentations that I do, be at peace. There's only one of you in this earth,
Yeah.
just one,
Yeah.
and every single one is special, and so not better than, but special, and that to me is important. It took me a long time to get there, that I'm at peace with who I am, and then give back and be kind and all of that kind of thing, and respect others and all those very fundamentals, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Let's stay in touch, right?
Absolutely. Can't
Take
wait
care.
to hear more about the book too. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.